to do a vegetable. So if you guys are looking for a 12-month garden of vegetables, this is the wrong presentation. Sorry. This is about gardening. No, gardening. Veggies are gardening too. This is about flowers. This is about landscape. This is about shrubs and perennials and all that type of stuff. So I will not be offended if you all leave, but I don't think I'm going to make anything uh, I have nothing to say about veggies. Just wanted to warn everybody. Okay, so let's start. How to create interest in every season in a Northern California Zone 9B garden. I think I love this because I love gardening and I love that we live here in Northern California and we have a fabulous, fabulous growing season that pretty much is absolutely year round. And we need to take advantage of that for our gardens. Um, Oops, there we go. Okay, so what we'll cover today in today's presentation is why Zone 9B is really uniquely suited for year-round gardening. What garden interest really means when we talk about garden interest. Planning for all 4 seasons, not just for spring, not just for peak gardening time, when we all get really excited about it, planning for the other times, we got to take advantage of that, being able to garden here in Northern California and finding some inspiration throughout the year, which of course it gets a little bit more difficult as we get closer to winter, but that's kind of what makes it a little fun. It makes you kind of stretch a little bit and seek out some more inspiration and see what you can find to install in your garden to really give you some of that garden interest. Then I want to share with you all, if you guys, I have a, if you're not familiar, I have a gardening YouTube channel, and I know some of you here do watch me, and you guys you probably already know this, right? But on my channel, I did a monthly blooming garden project, which was a project, I'll tell you more about it in a little bit, but it's a project that I loved, that I was really aiming to get something blooming in my garden every single month of the year. That was my goal, to get something blooming. And I think I achieved that. It was a really fun project to do. Focusing on plants that shine each month. So get your little notepads out. I'm going to give you guys lots of different plants that are going to bloom or have garden interest for every single month of the year. I'll try not to bore you too much, just talking about plants upon plants upon plants, but it gets to be really fun when you have to start thinking about it, especially once we start getting into October, November, December, and even January. Then we'll also cover creating habitat and supporting wildlife year-round in your garden, which is really important, especially in those slow months, winter months. Supporting pollinators and supporting wildlife becomes really important, and it starts to become something that's real fun to focus on those months of the year. And then I'll finish with giving you all tips for building your own 12-month garden. All right. And Jennifer, you're watching the chat for questions.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So the gift of gardening in Northern California. We are so lucky here. We are so, so very lucky here to be able to garden in the climate that we have. We can garden 12 months out of the year. I think of go time as beginning of March, and I really don't slow down until the end of October. And that really only leaves, November, December, and January. But there's still stuff we can do in the garden during those 3 months. So it's a gift. It's an absolute gift that we have. We can garden in January. We have blooms in December. Yes, we have blooms in December. We can harvest veggies year round if you're smart about it. We have real mild winters with, some of us have some frost, but we very rarely have hard frosts. We have long growing seasons, and we have opportunities for year-round planting. So if we wanted to, we could spend every single day in our garden if we wanted to deal with the rain and the cold. But we're Californians, most of us, and it gets down to 60 degrees and we can't handle it. So, but that's okay. So understanding our Mediterranean climate characteristics. This is obviously just generalized. I live in Davis, California, but this is really for most of Northern California. We have cool, wet winters. That's where we get the majority of our rainfall is during the winters. And we have hot, dry summers. And we have long shoulder seasons. My husband and I, we actually lived in Milwaukee for a little bit. And the difference between winter and spring was like a day. It was one day and everything changed. And we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe the change so fast because here we don't have that. It's a long, slow transition one season into another, and plants like that. Plants really like that, and that also gives us extended bloom periods. I always like to talk about plant tags. When you read a plant tag is made for the entire country. The entire country is reading the exact same plant tag, so we have to take that plant tag with a grain of salt. If it says, if it's telling us to plant a hydrangea in full sun, we got to think about that. But then we also have to think about when something's blooming, we might get 3, 4 more months out of a perennial that maybe somebody else won't get, or even an annual. So on that same note, many gardeners think of spring as gardening season. And while yes, spring is definitely gardening season, for us here, because of our Mediterranean climate and because of the heat that we have and the patterns in our climate, fall planting is often produces the best results. If you plant a perennial or if you plant a shrub in the fall, it's going to have plenty of time to develop root growth, and it's actually going to be a better plant in the long run. So winter, same thing, it's active gardening. If we're avoiding any hard freezes or anything like that, winter can be a fabulous time that we can go and we can install some really amazing garden interest. So my goal for this presentation is, even though we're in peak season, we're in June, it's hot, everything's in bloom, still it's a good time to kind of start thinking about fall and start thinking about even winter and things that you can add into your garden absolutely year round, not just this time. All right, so what does garden interest mean, right? And notice I say garden interest, not just winter interest. I'm talking about year-round gardening. It means one, flowers, right? Love love flowers. It means foliage. Foliage is something to think about as well. There are some plants where foliage is the shining star of that plant. Now, this one right here is called soft caress mahonia, and it actually does have a beautiful bloom, but it doesn't bloom until December or January, right? But the rest of the year we can enjoy this beautiful foliage, and really it can give you some amazing interest in your garden. But foliage definitely has garden interest, and it can add to your garden. Oops. Bark. Something to think, this is a crepe myrtle right here. Our crepe myrtles are starting to bloom, and I love crepe myrtle season. It's so gorgeous. They're so beautiful. But during the winter, maybe think about the bark that some of these plants have. It's really, really gorgeous. And when you start looking at that type of thing and start adding elements into your garden that can give you some garden interest, even if it's just from something like tree bark, it can make a huge, huge difference. Texture, right? Texture is another thing. This is one of my favorite plants, Helen von Stein Lamsier, or big ears Lamsier, Stachys byzantinia. I'm not pronouncing that right. But it has just absolutely beautiful texture. And this one for us is somewhat an evergreen. I won't call it 100% an evergreen, because if we have too rainy of a winter season, it might get kind of mushy, but it does keep its foliage and thus its texture and its garden interest for a very, very long time, especially in our area. Once you have grasses in the fall, the grasses will start coming out with their beautiful plumes. And if you leave those grasses up, if you don't cut them back right away, you have garden interest all throughout winter, because they're so beautiful. Panicums are just absolutely gorgeous in the middle of winter. After they've bronzed out, it gives your garden some texture that you could go out and you could take a photo of. And, it could be an absolute gorgeous photo, not a single bloom, just the texture from the grasses can really make a difference. And then structure. Now, structure is often, I think, what people think of when we talk about winter interest. You talk about boxwoods, you talk about hedges, you talk about evergreens. But there's different structure throughout the year. These are totem pole panicums that I have in my front garden bed. And the upright structure, these guys are crazy. They get to be about 6 feet tall, and they're just totally upright. And to me, their structure is just some of the most interesting thing in my garden right now. And not a bloom on it, right? Of course, there's blooms all around it, but it's just really, really interesting. So once you start kind of spreading, thinking about other things other than just bloom, other than just hedges or something like that, you really can start to find a 12-month garden, a garden that's going to take you through, and you're going to have something that really makes you joyful 12 months out of the year, which I think is super amazing. Oh, and then fragrance. I'm holding right here something called Fragrant Delight Heliotrope. If you haven't smelled it, stop what you're doing and go smell it. It's one of the best smelling plants, I think. I even have a candle in the heliotrope scent because I just love that scent. And it just brings me so much joy when it starts blooming. And so I can look forward to that month when the heliotrope starts blooming. And that's just something that's just more garden interest that we can enjoy in our gardens. So something I want you to think about is your spring versus summer, or spring versus fall garden, spring versus winter garden, really anything versus spring. A lot of us start thinking about our gardens in the spring, and then we go to the garden center and we buy all the fun stuff at the garden center and we plant it. But all of that stuff that you're buying in the spring and planting in the spring, a majority of it, its peak time is in the spring. So if you really just focus on that, you might have an absolutely beautiful garden in the spring, but then once the heat comes and in the summer, it might just kind of look, meh, right? Or in the winter, it might just you might just be waiting for that peak time during spring. So it's something to think about, watching your garden as each season goes on and making sure that you have something that really brings you joy every single season, every single month, honestly, is what I'm focusing on. So what I want to encourage is I want to encourage all of you to think like a museum curator. Think like you are your garden is a show garden. Your garden is a museum. Your garden is a display garden, and you have to curate how it's going to look month to month. And to do that, you have to think, what is happening in my garden this month? So right now, as I look out my window, I can see Angelonia just looking absolutely gorgeous. I can see Lantana just taking off and looking crazy. And I know my buddleias in the front yard and my butterfly bush is just looking absolutely beautiful. So I can say for June, I can make note of those and I can say, okay, those are beautiful this month. That's going to be my display this month. But then I have to think, okay, well, what's going to happen next month? Next month, I have to start thinking, okay, my crepe myrtles, they're starting right now, but pretty soon they're going to go nuts. And my panicle hydrangeas are going to start blooming really well as well. And even my dahlias, even though they're starting a little bit right now, they might come and really go crazy in July. And the goal is overlap of these two. You're a curator, you can't have a blank space in your garden, or you don't want a blank space in your garden. And so you want to overlap. As one plant begins to fade, another one will come in and begin to shine. And that's really when you start getting a 12-month garden that you can go out and you can enjoy every single day of the year. And that's the goal. So this video is one that I took in February, about 2 years ago, and I was at the garden center and I saw this plant, and I've had my eye on this plant. This is called purple lilac vine, or Hardenbergia. And if you've all seen this plant in February, it's just so joyful. It is blooms. It is so gorgeous. And it's at a time of the year when there's not a lot of other stuff going on. So when I was at the garden center and I saw this plant, I thought, oh my gosh, I want this in my garden. However, do I want to spend the space in my garden knowing that it's only going to bloom in February, right? After February, it starts getting the foliage and all really, it just has foliage all year. And it's one of those plants that maybe you have 9 months, I would say, of just foliage, but then the 3 months that you have the blooms are just absolutely gorgeous. So I was going back and forth whether I wanted to not waste the space, that's not the right word, but use the space for this plant in my garden, knowing it was only going to bloom a little bit in January, February, and March. And I decided to go for it, right? So to ruin the surprise, I decided to go for it, and I decided to plant this in my garden, and it brought me so much joy that every day in February and early March, I could go outside and I could see this plant and I could just see the beautiful blooms, and it got me so excited for the upcoming season. And that's when I realized I needed to kind of get myself over this hump of saving space for peak gardening time plants and really start putting plants that are going to shine at different times of the year. So um, I I started just this goal of trying to find something that was going to give my garden interest 12 months of the year. And I started really thinking about it. And this was, of course, in February. And so I had to go out and I had to figure out how to find plants that were blooming at a time when maybe not much else was blooming. And so one of my favorite ways to discover great plants at certain times of the year is I would drive. I would drive around town and I would look at people's gardens and I would see what was blooming. And I knew that that person, if it was blooming in their garden at that time, it would bloom in my garden at the same time. So I would take a picture, I would take note, I would figure out what each plant was. And I ended up doing this all the time. I would do it, mid-March, I would do it end of March, I would do it, early April, and I would just make notes of what was blooming in town with the thought of, okay, I got to get that in my garden so that I can have that interest at that specific time. And it was really fun. It was a fun way to see other gardens and to see what people would plant. There's one house in Davis that has calla lilies that just gorgeous calla lilies out front. And every time of the year when the calla lilies were blooming, I would get so excited to go drive by that house. And so then I thought, well, I got to put calla lilies in my own garden so that I could have that same joy. Another way that I always like to discover great plants is visiting the garden center every single month. Mark it on your calendars, even if you don't need anything, need to buy anything, go visit the garden centers because they do a really good job of featuring, usually out front, featuring what plants are looking really good at that time, right? Whether it be crepe myrtles or whether it be roses or whether it be purple fountain grass, they do a really great job of kind of guiding us and pushing us into the right direction. And so when a lot of people, they only, would go to the garden center maybe in spring and summer and then never visit in fall and winter. And it's really fun to visit in fall and winter. If you visit during camellia season, right? That's so much fun to see all the beautiful camellias that I wouldn't have seen had I not visited the garden center in December or January. And then third, of course, research, right? Looking on social media to see what people are posting, watching, talking to master gardeners, going to presentations, just really finding out what plants are going to bloom at the right time. I do want to say though, for research, you got to think how varied California is. If you say Northern California, do you mean Sonoma County, right, where it's a little bit colder and maybe things bloom a little bit later than it does here, or over by the coast or down south? Like it's very different. So kind of, I like methods 1 and 2 a lot better than method 3 because then you can really see when something is going to bloom and when it's going to have some beautiful interest in your garden. Okay, so now we'll go through and talk about the different plants. One that I planted for my monthly blooming garden in my own garden, and then also some other plants that have interest that particular month. So for January, I ended up planting a variegated pink winter Daphne. Now, if you've ever smelled a Daphne, it is absolutely heaven. It is so, so beautiful, and it gets these little pink blooms during January, and it's absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. And I think it's just a gift that we get this during January. Now, the hard thing about Daphne is it's really hard to get established in your garden, and it's really finicky and it can die. And I will totally admit that my Daphne has died and I need to plant it again. But that's one that you can plant in January and get some really beautiful winter interest with these pink blooms and the scent. And then you have this gorgeous foliage for the rest of the year. Other plants that give a lot of interest in January, one of my favorites is Camellia japonica. I love Camellia japonica. There's Camellia japonica and Camellia sasanqua, and sasanqua will bloom in the fall, like November, early December, and then japonicas bloom in January, February. And they're just gorgeous. I just love them. If you guys are familiar with Nuccio's camellias, they're just absolutely incredible. Get your hands on one because he's retiring and we won't have access to them anymore. They're just a beautiful plant, and it's really fun because it brings some amazing interest during a time when not a lot of other things are blooming. Hellebores are another really fun thing. I went to visit Philoli. If you all are familiar with Philoli, it's a garden, um, uh, South Bay area. I think it's Woodbridge. Is that what? I don't remember exactly where it is. Look it up, Philoli. They had, I think I went in late January. They had hellebores everywhere, and it was so, so gorgeous. It was so beautiful to see the hellebores with the paper whites. It made it such a huge difference to have those type of blooms in January, like in January. So there's a lot of the country that's absolutely covered with snow, and we have these beautiful, beautiful plants. Aloe arborescens is an incredible plant. I actually don't have this planted in my garden yet, but I want it in my garden. There's a vet clinic that has this planted all in front, and every time it starts blooming with these bright blooms, I just think it's the neatest thing. So that's for January. And then on here, you guys will see I wrote little comments, mostly for myself, just to remind you guys, January, you really want to think about pollinator support. Think about all those pollinators that are desperate for some type of food during the year. So planting something like a Camellia japonica or a hellebore, or letting your broccoli bolt, even if we had a warm uh, period during January, it's going to give those pollinators some support, which they desperately, desperately need during this time. So that's something else that's really fun to think about and to help with your garden. Okay. February, I kind of already talked about February because that's where this obsession with the 12-month garden got started with this Hardenbergia. I love this plant. This plant is so beautiful, and I went from not wanting to plant it in my garden because I didn't want to waste a spot that only had it blooms in February, but now I get so excited for February, which is a weird thing to say as a gardener, to get excited for February, but I get really excited for February because this plant is blooming, which makes it really fun. Other plant options in February are flowering quince. If you guys have seen flowering quince, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. It blooms in February around that time, and it's stunning. Magnolia stellata is another one. I actually have this in my garden. It's a magnolia, but it's like a little octopus, the blooms. It's really, really interesting, and it blooms before the foliage comes. So it's all these branches with these weird octopus blooms, and it's just so fun to see in February. And then we have manzanita. Manzanita starts blooming at this time. So the garden is starting to wake up. It's when everything starts to kind of have a little life to it, and it starts to become a really exciting, exciting time in the garden. Then we come to March. The thing that I planted for my blooming garden in March is osteospermum, African daisy. Now, osteospermum, the rating zone is it can be zone 10, but some of them go down to a zone 9. So they're kind of borderline perennials for us here in zone 9B. Mine overwinter pretty much every year. I think I've lost couple if we had a really cold time or something like that. But I love this plant because a lot of people will sell it as an annual. So you get it at the annual price, even though it's a perennial that lasts year to year. And they start blooming in March once the ground starts to warm up. And it's just this really beautiful pop of color. And they come in all different colors, absolutely all different colors. And you can kind of fit them into your garden. And the cool thing is, they tend to stop blooming as the heat comes. These are one of those plants that don't like the heat as much. But if you can protect them and keep them watered, they'll start blooming again in the fall, right? So I have this on my March blooming garden, but really I could have it on my October blooming garden too. It's really a great plant to have in your garden. Other garden interest plants are ceanothus. This is California lilac. If you see this in full bloom along the freeways, it's along 505. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. Dutch iris is beautiful. Nemesia is beautiful. March is when we're really starting to get into those cool season blooms, and you can really go absolutely crazy. Sweet alyssum is beautiful, and that's another borderline perennial that you can kind of overwinter a little bit, and really give your garden some amazing interest even in March. And I don't even have in here March is daffodil season, right? I mean, daffodils. Daffodils are just the ultimate garden interest. I love daffodils. When I see daffodils starting to come along the freeway, I get really excited because that means that it's go time. And so you just have to kind of start thinking about what you're going to start planting to get those blooms, even in early March when things are just starting to wake up. Oops. Okay, April. April is homestead verbena for me, hands down. If you guys don't know about homestead verbena, go to the garden centers, get yourself some homestead verbena. This is a really, really cool plant. There is no other colors of this plant. Homestead purple verbena is the only real type of homestead verbena. Some plant companies have named homestead pink, but it's not the actual homestead that was collected from a homestead, I think in Virginia or something like that. But it's a really gorgeous verbena plant, and it blooms and blooms and blooms and can really take over for a big space of your garden. And so once this starts blooming in your garden, it can make a huge difference. April is when we start seeing a lot of color. We've got foxglove. My absolute favorite plant in the whole entire world is Mystic Spire's salvia. This is another one that will just bloom nonstop. Nepeta is absolutely gorgeous. And of course, bearded iris. And bearded iris is funny. It's another one of those that I'm kind of like, oh, is it worth a space? Is it worth a spot in my garden for it to only bloom pretty much 1 month of the year? And yeah, I think it's worth a spot. And I do like the strappy foliage on the bearded iris as well. May, for my blooming garden project, I ended up picking pink lemonade honeysuckle. I love honeysuckle. It's amazing. I love Hall's japonica honeysuckle, which is you got to be careful with that because in some areas it's considered invasive. Here where we live, it's not technically considered invasive. But you kind of want to research that. Pink lemonade honeysuckle is gorgeous. Honestly, I could have picked anything for May, like anything at the garden centers. It's easy to find something blooming in May. This is just what I happened to pick. Roses are in bloom. Gara is stunning. Lavender is beautiful. Yarrow is incredible. This is when it's easy, right? This is the easy time for gardening. It's peak time at the garden centers. Mother's Day is the busiest day of the year for the garden centers, and it's so easy to find something absolutely beautiful for your garden. June is fun because that's when we start getting into heat. I always think of June as butterfly bush month or buddleia month. This is my Pugster amethyst buddleia, and this year, I just took this picture a little bit ago. This year, this buddleia was stunning. It was absolutely beautiful. This wasn't it, these plants ended up being absolutely covered with the buddleia blooms, and it just early June, this just really shined and it really took off. And every time I drove into my property, this is what I saw, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. Other things, think about the pollinators. Oh, this isn't right. This isn't the right picture. Shasta daisy right, is a really, really great one. The pollinators love Shasta daisies. Monarda is really, really fun. Monarda is great because obviously the bees love it. It's called bee balm is the common name. But it's a really fun one if you have a poor drainage area in your garden. Monarda is a really, really great plant to plant in an area that will, and it will actually suck up excess water. So if you have a really poor drainage or even like right next to, if you have a lawn that you have to use sprinklers on, you can plant this right next to the lawn. And it makes a huge difference because other plants that can't handle the poor drainage are going to suffer in that spot, but Monarda is really, really going to do really well. And then Agastache, the smell of the foliage of Agastache is just incredible for me, and it's just a beautiful plant that pollinators absolutely love. Now, July, the plant I planted for my July blooming garden is limelight hydrangea. This is what you call a panicle hydrangea, and a panicle hydrangea can handle heat a little bit better, our heat, as well as oak leaf. An oak leaf hydrangea can handle our heat a little bit better. However, I still warn people and say, you got to put this in afternoon shade. You got to protect this a little bit, otherwise it's going to scorch and it's not going to be happy. So morning sun, afternoon shade, but if you can get it in the right spot, it's beautiful. My mom has this in Redding, California, and they get intense, intense heat. It's crazy how hot it is, but she put this right up against her house, gets morning sun, and then shade the rest of the day, and they're huge and they're gorgeous and they look just absolutely beautiful. So this is a really fun garden interest plant for July. And then the blooms, they basically stay on for the whole rest of the year, and you can leave them on and let them turn brown, and then you get garden interest in the winter, or you can cut them and bring them inside. And I actually have my hydrangeas from last year still inside, and they're still beautiful. July is when crepe myrtles are crazy. Rudbeckia is crazy. I put in zinnias for here, and zinnias are an annual, of course. Zinnias are a true annual. Um, the thing about this, my monthly blooming garden project, I was really focusing on perennials and shrubs because I wanted to be able to come back next season and have something surprise me with blooms. And zinnias, they technically won't do that unless you let your zinnias go to seed and reseed itself, which I do sometimes. And then you can have zinnias the next year as well. So I felt like that one was worthy of a spot on this page. August, lantana. I absolutely love lantana. I mean, lantana is going right now. It's going crazy right now. But August is when things really start getting hot. We get into triple digits. And that's when you got to start thinking about what plants can handle the heat. And lantana can handle the heat. The cool thing about lantana is the stoma, the pores that the water evaporates from, they're all on the underside of the lantana's leaf. So by being on the underside, they're actually being shaded from the hot sun, which makes it be able to handle the heat a little bit better, which is why they do great in August. Same with gomphrena. Gomphrena, they go by a little bit of a different pathway in photosynthesis, and they need the heat to be able to do it. That's why your gomphrena is going to struggle a ton during the spring, but then once we start getting hot and the soil gets hot, it starts going crazy. Salvia leucantha is an amazing, amazing plant, and it's just getting started in August, but I could have put that plant in September or October, and it would be absolutely beautiful still. It's a really fun plant for fall, winter interest, and I absolutely love it. And then cannas, of course, are gorgeous. Cannas are another one that if you drive around town, you can see the cannas start blooming in August, where everything else is starting to brown out. The cannas are looking beautiful. The cannas over on Pole Line are looking absolutely gorgeous. And so it's something to think, if they're looking good there, they're gonna look good in my garden. And that's something that I want to put in my garden. For September, we're almost done. So for September, I chose purple fountain grass. This, of course, you could plant in the spring, but September is when it gets its plumes. I could have chosen any grass, any pennisetum, any panicum, and September would be the time for it. That's when we start getting the breezes and the grasses, start kind of blowing in the wind, and they're just so beautiful. They bring so much interest to your garden during that time, and September is when they really start to shine. So purple fountain grass is probably the one we all know, and we can get it for $10 for a gallon and divide it, and it's like never ending plants for your garden. But there's other grasses that I want you all to think about as well that can be really, really beautiful. Muhlenbergia is a really interesting one. This is called candy floss muhlenbergia, and that one, it gets these pink plumes. I mean, it's candy floss is what it is. It's really, really beautiful. So September is a good time to think about texture in the garden, all the different textures that you have. I just found this out today that Russian sage is no longer, the scientific name is no longer Perovskia. It's now Salvia yangii. I didn't know that. So for those of you who know Russian sage, the scientific name is called now Salvia yangii. So I thought that was really interesting. But Russian sage is another absolutely beautiful one that has amazing texture in September. And then, of course, autumn joy sedum, where the sedum starts to get its blooms and it starts to kind of turn a little bit of colors. And that's another one that you can leave on for winter interest. And it's just absolutely stunning all throughout the winter. Okay, October, hands down, my favorite blooming plant in October is lion's tail, Leonotis leonaris. It is really, really cool. It has these amazing orange blooms to it. It can get pretty big, but it's just a stunning plant in October, and I just think it's so appropriate. The orange for October is perfect. So the orange of the lion's tail, and then the purple fountain grass, and then you add in some mums, and you just have the perfect fall garden that's giving you that winter interest that you want. Another one that I love talking about trees is Chinese pistache. This is the tree that really turns that orange color for us here in Northern California. Our trees don't turn as much as they do, in Vermont or something like that, or even Tahoe area. But if you find the right varieties, Chinese pistache, there's certain trees that it does get cold enough for them to have that chemical change, and Chinese pistache is absolutely my favorite one. And then there's also Japanese maples. This is a blood good Japanese maple. Blood good Japanese maples, they're this burgundy color all year, but as it starts to get cold in October, it will turn like a bright red color. So foliage color is really really takes interest this time of year. For November, I chose Yuletide Camellia. This is a Camellia sasanqua. Remember, I was talking about Camellia japonicas back in January and February. And this is Camellia sasanqua that blooms earlier, and Yuletide Camellia is probably the most famous Camellia sasanqua, and it's just because the blooms are just absolutely gorgeous. And this is one of those plants that will be blooming over Christmas, right? In our gardens here in Northern California, which makes it so, so very fun. So this is a really, really great plant for that winter interest in November. And there's other Camellia sasanquas, same thing, but this one is just the perfect color for the time. November is a good time to think about structure. Arborvitae are absolutely beautiful. Platinum Beauty Lamandra is such a fabulous plant for texture and structure and evergreen interest. And it's one of the easiest plants that I grow in my garden. And it looks exactly the same in November as it does in May. It's really a great, great plant to add into your garden. And then I also put in heuchera. Heuchera is really cool because for a lot of people, it's an herbaceous perennial where it dies back as it gets cold. But for us, it keeps its foliage, right? As long as we don't have a crazy cold winter. For us, it will keep its foliage and it'll actually look really beautiful even in November. And you can see the foliage color that heuchera can have. So adding some of that, like imagine adding the heuchera underneath the arborvitae with the Platinum Beauty Lamandra, you have a beautiful November garden, right? And so you can create an area of your garden that really can bring some amazing interest in November. And then finally, last but not least, here's that Mahonia soft caress that I was telling you all about. And you can see the little yellow blooms on there, and they're really beautiful. And something to think about for the soft caress Mahonia, I always see pollinators on them in the middle of December when you don't expect to see pollinators, but they are absolutely there. And it just makes me realize how important it is to give some blooms and pollinator support during these times. So this Mahonia is it's different than other Mahonias. It's not spiky, obviously soft caress. It's really gorgeous. It has amazing texture. And then we also get the benefit of these beautiful blooms in December. And I would have never really thought about this plant had it not been December and I was really focusing on, okay, what's going to bring my garden some interest at this time of year, and this one brings me so much joy, and even in different times of the year it brings me joy as well. Now, kind of the classic winter interest plant is a boxwood. I think that that's great. I love boxwood. We can do better though, right? Toyon berries, toyon and pyracantha, especially this orange pyracantha. My neighbor has this down the street, and I'm just jealous of it every December. These berries, not only do they support the wildlife, they support the birds, but it's gorgeous. Like the pyracantha is really gorgeous in December, and it makes me want to stop and just admire how beautiful it is. So the structure from the boxwood is great. The blooms from the Mahonia are beautiful, and then the berries, and you can have a gorgeous December garden here in Zone 9B. So speaking of wildlife, just remember that wildlife doesn't take the winter off. The pollinators still need food. Birds need berries, beneficial insects need shelter, and you want all those guys to stay in your garden even in the wintertime, because once everybody wakes up and all the bad guys come out, you want these beneficials to be here to help keep your garden healthier year round. So give them what they need during the winter. So my tips for creating your own 12-month garden: walk your garden monthly and see if there's something there that really sparks joy. See if there's something there that you're excited about every single month. And if one month you can't find anything, it's time to go to the garden center, or it's time to think about adding something. So I have a little note in my phone, and it's month by month, and I write down what's blooming each month. And if that list, what's blooming that month, is kind of low, then I know that's the month I really kind of need to focus on going to the garden center or start looking around town and seeing what else is blooming. Think about blooms, foliage, structure, texture. All of it is interest, and it can excite you if you're not just focusing on the blooms or just focusing on the winter interest or structure or something like that. Really start getting creative, and you can have a really interesting garden. And you can do what I did with my 12-month garden is challenge yourself. Plant one plant each month for a whole year and see what happens the next year. Once everything kind of grows in, you might be really, really excited the next year because you might have a beautiful 12-month garden by planting something each month. And start thinking ahead a little bit. Start thinking about, okay, what am I expecting to see next month? What do I see in my neighbor's yard that maybe I need to get and put in my yard? Start thinking ahead and thinking like a curator. So remember, we're in Zone 9B. Take advantage of it. We are so lucky. Use it. Interest can come from more flowers. I love observation. I love going to different gardens. I love watching videos of gardens. It's one of the best design tools for your garden. And every month in your garden should offer you something that brings you joy. All right, that's it. Under 45 minutes. Good. Okay, let me check the comments and see if you guys have any questions. Put them in the chat. Oh, Philolias in Woodside. Yes, thank you. All right.
There's a comment Jennifer has put, everyone, all the participants, if you can fill that survey that Jennifer has, that would be awesome. There's a link in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer, for posting Philoli. So the link
Yep.
to Philoli is in the chat.
I put a link to your YouTube
Oh, thank you. Appreciate
page
that.
as well.
Thank you. Kay says Philoli is in Woodside. Yes, go if you haven't seen it, and it's worth to go even in the off season, early season. They have it's a 12-month garden. It's absolutely gorgeous. Spring says, how to tell the difference between tree of heaven and Chinese pistache. Once you see it enough times, you can see the difference. What I would do is, if you're interested in a Chinese pistache, I would go to a reputable garden center and get it from there, because I'm pretty sure is it the female Chinese pistache has berries? Can
Yeah,
someone?
they're
Okay. Okay. So you want
nasty.
a male Chinese pistache, and there's one variety of Ken something that's really great. But you can tell the difference between the Tree of Heaven and Chinese pistache for sure. And then Paula says, find the Daphne Adora, not fund. Find the Daphne Adora. Did I write the wrong thing? I might have wrote the wrong thing. Oh, I see. Where do you find the Daphne Adora to purchase? So Green Acres will have them. Redwood Barn Nursery will have them. Ace, like all garden centers will have them. However, they'll have them during the time when they're blooming, because that's what garden centers do. They really won't take the space on a shelf to put a Daphne there if it's not blooming or it doesn't have interest, because probably nobody's going to buy it. It's like if you were going to get a hosta. A hosta is an herbaceous perennial and it completely dies back. They're not going to put what looks like an empty can or a can of soil on the shelf, even though we know that there's a hosta in there and it's great. You're not going to be able to find it until the spring or summer when you can actually see the hosta. So Daphnes, you'll find them at all the garden centers, but you want to go look in the winter time when they're actually going to have interest. That's why it's so great to go to the garden center every single month, and really you can see what they have and what's really amazing. Okay, Filoli is worth the cost of membership. I agree, Jody, even though I don't have a membership. but I agree. I agree. Jody, don't you live further down there? I think you live down there.
No,
Okay.
I live right by you. Well, I live in Stockton, so I'm
Oh,
just
you
south.
do. Oh, you do. Okay, never mind. Never mind. Filoli is absolutely incredibly beautiful though. I love Filoli. And if you guys if you've been to Park Winters is in Winters, California, go there too, because they have so much inspiration down there too. Jeffrey says Filoli is amazing at Christmas time. I gotta go. I think they have some really fun fall stuff too, which is really fun. So, if no one else has any questions, thank you so much for coming, for being at the presentation. Make sure you fill out that survey, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Janie.
Hey, Jane.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
It was good.
That was great.
Thank
Thank you.
you.